and systemic corrective action. My name is Shannon Craddock, and I'm the Programs and Accreditations Manager here at PJR, and I'm pleased to welcome you today. Today we're going to spend some time talking about why we selected this particular topic. It's a very important one and probably one of our most popular webinars. We'll talk about some fundamentals and really what sets the stage for good problem solving, and that's a well-written audit finding. We'll then talk about actions taken to correct, corrections, or containment actions. We'll talk about root cause analysis, focusing on the 5 why technique. We'll talk about corrective actions or actions taken to prevent a problem from recurring, and actions taken to prevent a problem from occurring in the first place, or preventive actions. And then we'll talk about what makes a sound corrective action verification exercise. To ensure sound quality, all participants have been muted. I will be fielding questions at the end, so please type them into the question feature in GoToWebinar, and I'll answer as many of them as possible at the end of the prepared presentation. So first, why are we doing this webinar? Well, we want your organization to improve. We're firm believers, as are most industries, that there should be a strong correlation between third-party audit performance and how you're doing in the eyes of your customers. So if your customer scorecards are low, they're in the red, and our audits aren't finding anything, we're not doing you any favors. The purpose of a management systems audit isn't to convince the auditor to write as few nonconformities as possible. Every nonconformity shall be documented as such, and it's up to you, the client, to take systemic corrective action for each and every nonconformity that's found. And this sound problem-solving process on all existing nonconformities is what's going to lead to this improved performance in the eyes of your customer. So let's talk about setting the stage for problem solving. An audit finding should have 3 distinct parts: the statement of nonconformity, citation of objective evidence that supports that statement, and a clear selection of the requirement in the standard that's not being met. Audit findings that do not contain these 3 parts should not be written by PJR auditors and should not be accepted by PJR clients. In fact, I'm here today to tell you you're completely empowered. If our auditors do not present clearly written findings with these 3 component parts, I would ask the auditor to rewrite them. And if any PJR auditor gives you difficulty about this, please call me directly. Findings such as this should be rejected by PJR clients in the closing meeting, and our auditors should be rewriting them. From time to time, our auditors may write observations or opportunities for improvement. When these are documented by the auditor, they'll be written as simple statements, and they won't contain the 3 constituent parts. There's no citation of a requirement not being met. In addition, the issue and perhaps some objective evidence might be lumped together. So let's talk about some pitfalls when writing a statement, when writing a nonconformity. Often, the nonconformity recorded is not the problem, but instead a symptom of the problem. The problem needs to be expressed as an issue with the system. If it's written in terms of a person or a specific incident, an uncontrolled gauge, a single form, then it's at the symptom stage, and this is not appropriate. And I see both internal auditors and third-party auditors making this mistake. You want to help the problem-solving team get to the true problem, i.e. the systemic issue, or the problem-solving efforts will not be effective. Fixing symptoms will not stop the issue from recurring. So at this point, I'd like to introduce kind of a common everyday example. We're heading into the winter months, and for those of you in colder climates, that means a lot of people getting sick. So suppose that you're running a fever and you've got a sore throat and some body aches and pains. You may take Tylenol or Aleve or Motrin to alleviate your symptoms. But fixing symptoms isn't going to stop the issue. If you have an underlying strep throat infection causing these symptoms, until you knock out those strep throat bacteria with an antibiotic, the issue is going to persist. So you may treat the symptoms, but that's not going to treat the true root cause of the issue. So you want to make sure, in this particular case, the problem statement isn't written in such a way that you're talking about a sore throat, a fever, body aches and pains, but it's written at a breakdown with a systemic strep throat infection level. In addition, a well-written nonconformity should stand the test of time. Your organization should be able to open a nonconformity written by a PGR auditor 5 or 6 years ago and know exactly what the situation was. So let's look at some examples of poorly written findings. The first is there was no training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 indicating competence to run that job. The issue here is that this is at a symptom level and not the true problem. We're confusing objective evidence with the statement of nonconformity. A better way to write this: the system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. And what objective evidence supports that? No training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 indicating competence to run that job. And then a clear citation of the ISO 9001, in this case the 2008 version, of the requirement not being met, taken out as far as possible. 622E as opposed to just 622, for example. But here we're focusing the problem-solving team's efforts on the broken system and not just what was going on with that first shift operator running job 9954. So again, the well-written nonconformity, the system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. We're focusing on the systemic issue and not just the incidents or symptoms of the problem. Let's take a second example. The quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Again, this is a symptom and not the true problem. Again, we're confusing objective evidence with the statement of nonconformity. A better way to write this: the document control system is not completely effective. Focusing the problem-solving team's efforts on the broken document control system and not the specific symptom seen that's written in terms of a person or incident, i.e. the quality auditor in the blue cell using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. We're clearly citing the 9001-2008 requirement not being met and taking that out as far as possible, 423D in this case. Again, the better statement of nonconformity: the document control system is not completely effective. We're focusing on the systemic issue and not on the incident, not on that one quality auditor in the blue cell. Okay, so some concluding remarks and points to remember. When you review a statement of nonconformity written by your internal auditor, a customer doing an audit, and most importantly a PGR auditor, you want to ask, have we distinguished between the symptoms and the real problem? Does that final statement of nonconformity focus on the systemic issue? And does that objective evidence and citation of a requirement contain enough detail and is taken as far out as possible to assist in understanding? PGR has an internal document that requires all auditors to document any non-fulfillment of a requirement as such. I just did an audit yesterday, and I documented a number of findings. Everything I found that was non-conforming was documented as such. We tell our auditors it's absolutely inexcusable not to do so. While it may result in more audit findings for you, there's no benefit to you if we make conscious decisions not to document nonconformities. Doesn't help you improve and contributes to the diminishment of the integrity of management system certification. So it's our expectation that all findings written by PGR auditors will be written as just discussed. Okay, let's move on to actions taken to correct or corrections. Also containment actions if they're product specific. These are actions taken with respect to the symptom or incident. They're incident-specific actions. They're very important and should be taken immediately or as soon as possible to stop the symptoms from getting worse. They typically take two forms. One would be we calibrated the gauge, or we controlled the form, we retrained the operator, we made up the missed audit, etc. Or adding a layer of inspection to catch any further occurrence of the issue. The problem is that inspection adds cost to the system, not value. And we're going to later see that once corrective action is implemented, then costly added inspections can be removed from the system if we've discovered the true root cause and implemented the best corrective action to address that root cause. Containment actions or corrections should be very specific. So in the case of our first example, the training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 was updated to reflect his competency to run that job unsupervised. Or all copies of the uncontrolled form the quality auditor in the blue cell was using were destroyed. Most people don't struggle with this. What most people struggle with is the fact that corrections also need to include an extent analysis, and this is missing in many corrective action responses submitted to PJR. So if we found a couple gauges that were not calibrated, a good correction is going to do two things. One, it's going to tell us that you calibrated these gauges and investigated if any product was measured or verified with these gauges. Second, we're going to expect you to look at all of your gauges in your system and make sure they are in a known state of calibration, and if not, take appropriate action. So just similarly, if we find one untrained operator, we're going to expect that you look to make sure that all operators' training is up to date. If we find one uncontrolled form, we're going to expect that you do a sweep of your entire facility to look for other uncontrolled documents, and then report the results of that analysis. Okay, let's move on to root cause. A common pitfall with root cause is that many restate the incident for the root cause analysis. This is not acceptable. Two examples would be, our organization failed to update the training matrix for the operator running job 9954. Yes, auditee, we know that. We told you that. Or the quality auditor in the blue cell didn't use the correct form to record the results of first article inspection. Again, we already told you that in our statement of finding and objective evidence. You have not yet told us why. You simply restated the issue itself. Another pitfall, although certainly not as common, is that some CARs will give containment actions for the root cause. This is also not acceptable. Okay, probably the most important slide in the entire presentation. So if you're checking your email or Facebook page, tune back in. A good root cause analysis answers the question, what in the system failed such that the problem occurred? What in the system failed such that the problem occurred? You'll see here the focus is on the system and not the incident or symptoms of the problem. It's possible that problems may have multiple root causes, and some problems may have several possible root causes. If you're not sure of the true root cause, you need to take corrective actions for all. How do you know if you have the true root cause to the problem? Well, you can turn the problem off and on, just like a light switch. If the problem cannot be turned off and on at will, then the root cause has probably not been found. This is known as recreating the defect. If when you recreate the defect, the problem does not recur, you may not have the true root cause. There are many different techniques for root cause analysis. Is not, the fishbone diagram, the 5 why, or what I like to refer to as the why technique, because sometimes you get there in 3 whys, sometimes you get there in 6 whys. So let's go through the appropriate use of the why analysis technique using the 2 examples we've been following through in this class. Remember our finding. The system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. It's supported by the following objective evidence. No training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 indicating competence to run that job. Well, why was the training matrix not there or not up to date? Well, the first shift supervisor failed to update the training matrix as required by the first of every month. Well, why did they fail to update it? Well, before the end of the previous month, the HR manager would email the training matrix template to all of the supervisors, but it didn't happen this particular month. Why is that? Well, the HR manager left the company before the end of the month, and her replacement didn't email the template to every supervisor. Why didn't she know to email the template? Well, the procedure for training didn't include a requirement to prompt the new HR manager to do this. So in this case, the problem-solving team felt they got to the true root cause in 4 whys as opposed to 5. And this certainly is okay. It may not take 5 whys to get there, and certainly sometimes it takes more than 5 whys. How can you, as a problem-solving team, know that you've gone far enough? Well, it's important that it is, in fact, a problem-solving team doing the why analysis, and not just one person sitting alone at their computer responding to PGR nonconformities in the 11th hour. If you have a lot of people agreeing that, yes, all viewpoints, all inputs have been considered, you can have a lot more confidence than if it's just one person on your problem-solving team. Okay, let's look at our second example. The document control system is not completely effective. In our objective evidence, the quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Well, why were they using an uncontrolled form? Well, the controlled version of the form had all been used up in the blue cell, so the quality auditor resorted to an uncontrolled form. Why? Well, this person was not aware that when no hard copies of a particular form were available, that the latest version of all forms could be accessed through the company's database. Why didn't the person know that they had this level of access? Well, they weren't given a username and password for the database. Why? HR did not have a policy to ensure all new hires were granted a username and password. Again, our multidisciplinary, multi-member problem-solving team felt they got to the true root cause in 4 whys. Some things that we often see but we do not accept for root cause are as follows. Oversight, I forgot, another ISO 9001 blunder, human error, or our consultant messed up. A couple words about our consultant messed up. Doesn't matter. You are ultimately responsible for the integrity and conformity of your system. Your consultant is not. I did skip over misunderstanding the requirement. I would accept misunderstanding the requirement at an initial audit or maybe a first surveillance audit or maybe even on a transition audit when you're transitioning to the new version of a standard. I would not accept this on Surveillance Audit 37. By that time you should understand the requirements. Keep in mind, if your root cause is misunderstanding the requirement, the only acceptable corrective action is gaining competence in the requirements. So let's talk about corrective actions. They need to address the root cause, and they therefore should address that very important question. What in the system failed such that the problem occurred? A common pitfall here is that many organizations will repeat their correction or containment instead of giving the corrective action that addresses the root cause. This is not acceptable. Not only should corrective actions address the system, but they should be irreversible and involve a change in the system. Training in and of itself is generally not a system change. Chances are you already trained in the first place, so there needs to be a system change that goes along with it. In addition, most companies will indicate retraining as part of their corrective action. You need to seriously consider changing the way you did training. Chances are you trained before. How are you going to ensure that training is more effective this time? Are you changing the format of the training? Are you making it interactive? Are you using an exam at the end of the training to ensure that the training was effective? All that needs to be spelled out in your response. In the automotive industry and now some other industries, corrective actions should prompt changes to your design, process, schemas, and control plans. These are meant to be living documents and need to be updated to reflect any corrective actions that you take and any permanent system changes you're making. There should be at least one corrective action for each root cause that's identified, and subsequent data should show that the problem has 100% disappeared and that you can turn it off like a light switch. That's how you know you had the true root cause. So let me share with you an example of a problem where the problem-solving team felt that they had identified the true root cause, but subsequent data showed that the problem had not 100% disappeared, so in fact, the root cause was not appropriate. I used to work in an automotive manufacturing facility, and there was a particular press that had a dual cavity tool that dropped a left-hand part and a right-hand part for the vehicle. Very simple shoot and ship part, no further assembly or secondary processing needed. The auditor simply inspected the part for flash or any molding defects and then packed the left-hand part in the left-hand box and the right-hand part in the right-hand box. Only that wasn't what was happening. General Motors was complaining that right-hand parts were found in left-hand boxes and vice versa. And it was slowing down and sometimes stopping their line. This was a huge issue that led to us being put on controlled shipment and having third party sorting and inspection companies on site at our facility at tremendous cost. So we convened a problem-solving team and determined that the root cause was the narrow manufacturing cell arrangement. Instead of the left-hand pack-out box being on the left-hand side of the operator's body and the right-hand pack-out box being on the right-hand side of the operator's body, The pack-out boxes were directly in front and behind one another due to the narrow manufacturing cell arrangement. So that operator had to realize that the left-hand pack-out box was directly in front of him and the right-hand pack-out box was directly behind that. Not the most logical arrangement. So we moved that manufacturing press, and we moved the manufacturing presses on either side of that press so that we can have a more logical layout for the pack-out boxes. The operator would grab the two parts, drop by the mold onto the conveyor belt, inspect them, put the left-hand box with his left-hand part with his left hand into the left-hand pack-out box, and the right-hand part with his right hand into the right-hand pack-out box. All very logical, very ergonomic. However, subsequent data did not show that the problem had 100% disappeared. Even though we spent thousands of dollars moving presses and reorienting the manufacturing cell, GM was still getting right-hand parts and left-hand boxes and vice versa. So we knew we did not have the true root cause. Subsequent data did not show that the problem had 100% disappeared. We weren't able to turn the problem off, just like a light switch. So what we did is we reconvened our multidisciplinary problem-solving team, and this time we invited a material handler from the third shift, and he said something very poignant. You know, if it was impossible to pack a right-hand part into a left-hand box, pack a left-hand part into a right-hand box, this would never happen. Sure enough, we took that as our root cause, and to address that root cause, we had a packaging engineer re-engineer the packaging so you couldn't stuff a left-hand part into a right-hand box and vice versa. And we saw that the problem did in fact 100% disappear. We had turned it off like a light switch. We knew we had the true root cause. So let's go back to the two examples we've been following through this webinar and see if the corrective actions address the root cause. Again, our nonconformity, the system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. Our corrective action, the procedure for training was updated to include a requirement for the HR manager to email the training matrix template to all supervisors for updating before the end of each month. The new HR manager was trained, and she also added an automatic reminder to Microsoft Outlook to perform this task. Does this corrective action address the root cause? Let's see. The procedure for training did include a requirement to prompt the new HR manager to email the template. And you will see that now, in fact, it does. The procedure for training was updated. Our second example, the document control system is not completely effective. Our corrective action, the new hire work instruction was revised to include a requirement to grant new hires a username and password for the database as appropriate. All HR personnel were trained on this change. Does this corrective action address the root cause? HR did not have a policy to ensure all new hires were granted a system username and password, and in fact this corrective action does. There is now a work instruction for that. Okay, let's spend a few minutes discussing preventive actions. And although this is not a 9001-2015 requirement, the intent of this is still embedded within 9001-2015. Preventive action also exists as requirements in some standards to this day. So, preventive actions answer one of two questions. What other systems exist that might have the same root cause present? Or, what systems could I have had in place that would have prevented this from happening? Many corrective action reports will put corrective actions for preventive actions. This is not appropriate. Preventive actions address the future, not the past, what could still happen, not what did happen. If they were addressing what did happen, they would be corrective actions. they should address the system, not the incident, and involve changing the system to prevent future problems. Future problems. Keep in mind that preventive actions are not only identified because of nonconformities. And many management system standards require preventive action as a proactive process with inputs from multiple sources. Near-miss reports, 5S programs, safety walkthroughs, lean initiatives, third-party audit, opportunities for improvement, employee suggestions, etc. In other words, no nonconformity should not mean no preventive actions. So oftentimes I'll see auditors write a finding because the organization has no preventive actions, which really isn't appropriate. If the organization has no system for requiring opportunities for preventive action, that certainly is a finding, and a major one at that. But if the organization does have a system requiring input from a variety of sources and just makes a business decision not to implement any of those as preventive actions, that's perfectly acceptable. Okay, let's talk about verification. This is a critical and often not performed step in the problem-solving process. And one reason might be is that many corrective action problem-solving forms do not have spots for verification for people to document their verification efforts in the appropriate location on the form or at all. And in a sound verification exercise, the following needs to take place. Have the containment actions or corrections been taken? Has proper root cause analysis been performed, and we can turn the problem off like a light switch? Has irreversible systemic corrective action involving a system change been implemented that addresses the root cause? And if those corrections or containment actions were of the costly added layer of inspection, have those been identified? And preventive actions have been taken if appropriate. Keep in mind as you're doing your verification that corrective actions, while we want them to be irreversible, tend to be reversible. System changes mean you're changing the way work is performed, and change is difficult for everyone. Systems and people tend to return to where they feel comfortable. So continue to verify actions even after you get positive results on the first verification. Sometimes, like a good bottle of wine, things need to age, and you need to go back and verify several times before closing it on your log. To be clear, we will never look at your problem-solving efforts while on site for the given audit. This makes no sense. We want you to take the time to convene a problem-solving team and give good due diligence in your efforts. If we're looking at your responses during the course of the audit itself, we're not doing you any favors. And we will always continue to verify the effectiveness of previous corrective actions for nonconformities written on prior audits while we're on site for the next audit. I'd like to acknowledge that partial slide content was provided by the IAOB. And that is all for the prepared presentation, but I will gladly field any questions or comments that you have. Again, participants have been muted to ensure sound quality, so please feel free to type your questions into the question feature, and I'll answer as many of them as I can. Copies of today's slides and a recording of the webinar will be available for download at our website, www.pjr.com, approximately 24 to 48 hours at the conclusion of this webinar. Getting a great question. How long should we take to close a power car? Sean, there's no answer to that. You need to, before you close something on your log, again, remember what I said about sound verification activities. People and systems tend to return to where they feel comfortable. So you need to have multiple verification points throughout the process before you can have a comfort level closing it. Allison's asking, where does risk come into place? Risk comes into place in a lot of instances in this presentation. The concept of preventive action is completely risk-based, Allison. Deciding how long to keep things open or closed on your log is also risk-based. Someone's asking if PGR offers 17025 webinars. PGR does not offer 17025 webinars, Scott. I'm going to read this question verbatim. How would one deal with the problem of company culture, where the number of cars in a system could lead to unemployment? I'm guessing what this requester is getting at is in our system, top management or the decision makers leads correlate a lot of cars with maybe managers not doing their job, and a lot of cars may lead to people getting laid off or fired. If that's the case, Allison, your top leadership is certainly going to struggle with 9001-2015. Where they're expected to be actively involved in the system. And as cliche as it sounds, well-written cars and good problem solving will eventually help you get better. So while there may be a spike in the number of corrective actions or corrective action requests, well-implemented corrective actions will lead to fewer systemic issues as time goes on. Someone's asking, what if you have sound systems in place but the failure was truly employee error, i.e. laziness? Do you continue to add costly layers of inspection for just one error, or just do a retraining? Well, if operators are allowed to make errors, Tim, that leads me to believe that there may not be error proofing in your processes, so your systems may not be as sound as you think they are. It's systems that allow employees to make mistakes. You may, as opposed to doing multiple rounds of retraining and reinspection, look at adding some pokey to your system. An observation or OFI are not considered nonconformities by definition. Otherwise, they would be non-fulfillments of requirements, and a nonconformity should be written. If a system is a nonconformity, do all issues need a CAR or PAR? Yes. The extent of your problem solving may be limited if you can justify that through your extent analysis. I would think, Carla, that your quality team or a member of your quality team would be a good participant in a problem-solving team, and I see no conflict of interest in that. We'll wait a few more minutes to see if any other questions come in. Again, feel free to type any questions into the question feature in GoToWebinar. Again, visit our website, www.pjr.com, for information on upcoming webinars on a variety of topics. In addition, in the same location, you can download a copy of today's slides and a recording of this webinar. Some additional questions coming in. Can you reiterate the 3 items you mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, please? Absolutely. Let's go back to that slide. What makes up a good nonconformity? The 3 component parts are as follows. The statement of nonconformity written at the system level, objective evidence to assist in understanding, and the citation of the requirement not being met. Yeah, getting some feedback that some employees are reluctant to admit their participation or their actions that may have led to a nonconformity, thus making investigations to get to the true root cause difficult because they fear they're going to get fired. Again, Leslie, I feel that that's really a corporate culture issue that needs to get addressed, and management needs to create a culture where people don't fear losing their job for being honest in these problem-solving meetings, because this honesty is going to lead to the best, most strategic corrective actions first time through and a cost savings in the long run. Someone's saying, what if the root cause is something I can't control, if it's something a third party is doing? Kate, I'd ask you why you're still using that particular third party and why they are still on your approved supplier list. Someone's asking, how long do we keep verifying corrective actions? It's probably going to depend on what the specific corrective action is. Some I've seen open for as long as 18 months if it involves a significant process change along with human involvement. Sometimes it may not be that long. You really have to be the best judge and look at how long you're getting consistent positive results in your verification activities. I'm going to read this next comment question verbatim. We are asked to conduct value-added audits and look for areas that can be improved. Please address how a finding could be made in a value-added audit even if the status quo seems to work. So certainly an organization could have a conforming system. They could meet the requirements of the given standard, 9001 for example. That's just part of it. You're not only are you expected to conform with the requirements, but you're supposed to meet the expected outcomes of accredited QMS certification. And you can only do that by continually improving your system, and internal and third-party audits will drive that. So if an organization is consistently meeting its process targets that are measured, and you're not elevating those targets, for example, and driving improvement, what's the point of being certified? What's the point of being in business? Wait a couple more minutes. There were some last-minute questions. We'll see if there's another rush of last-minute questions. Getting a question, how do you deal with complacent warehouse managers? Again, this seems to be a corporate culture issue. You know, this is something senior leadership needs to get involved with, Kelly. I don't have a specific answer for that. But, you know, we're talking about process-based auditing here. That's what third-party certification bodies do. And that process culture really should be embedded in your organization. How warehouse managers will likely own some warehouse-oriented processes. They need to be held responsible for those. If that process that's warehouse-oriented doesn't meet its target, what actions are taken? Are they involved in those corrective actions? Needs to start with senior leadership. Rob, we don't share any examples of completed forms. As soon as I do that, all forms start to look like that. I hope you can appreciate that. Wait, just one more minute, folks. Okay, everybody, we thank you for your time. Again, access our website, www.pgr.com, for information on this webinar and future sessions. I wish you all a very happy holiday and Happy New Year.